Welcome to another episode of Mastery Talks. Today we're glad to have Richard Cox Braden back with us. Richard is an instructor at Stanford D School. He is lecturing at Stanford and Harvard on design thinking, creative leadership, and innovation.
Richard's upcoming book, Innovationish, promises to make innovation accessible to everyone. Let's explore his insights on how we can all harness the power of our creativity.
Richard, welcome. I'm glad this conversation keeps going on because we previously hosted Richard in person for our community at Stanford, where we had an enriching discussion about innovation and creative leadership. Now it's great to continue this conversation and share your insights with Mastery Talk listeners, Richard. You know how we value your work. It's not the first time, and we hope not the last time we are talking with you, and we're thrilled to have you back with us.
Great. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your upcoming book, Innovationish. What inspired you to write this book, and what you hope to achieve with it?
Yeah. So after about almost 20 years now of teaching creativity and innovation in a variety of different ways, I had yet to run across a person who could not do it. CEOs and executives, primary, secondary, high school teachers, middle managers, college students, both undergrads and grads that I teach, lawyers, engineers, finance, marketing. Some of the best ones are the primary to high school students. And as a consultant and an educator, I have also walked into hundreds of rooms and asked thousands upon thousands of people, are you creative? And only a couple of hands will go up each time, which makes me so sad because I know it to not be true. And that's how people sit and hold themselves. And so, I typically will start a class or working with a group with an exercise, and they do some drawing and then they draw collaboratively together, and you can watch the smiles come up, and you can watch the people change in the room. And after that exercise, most of the hands will go up when I ask it again. Now, it's not that I am an amazing teacher. I mean, I am an amazing teacher, but it's not just me that's doing it. What we did was change their definition and their relationship to what creativity means. That same thing is true for innovation. People think that it's something that it isn't. And so there are all these myths about what innovation is or should be. And there are all these myths about an innovator and who that is, like a lone genius off that has this eureka moment that just happens. And the reality is that that is just never the case. Those things hold people back from even trying to do innovation. And so they're waiting for someone to help or to give them permission. And we wanted to address that because innovation is for everyone. So that's why we wrote the book.
That's fantastic. We really can't wait to read the full book. But meanwhile, can you tell us how do you plan to make innovation accessible to everyone?
Right. We did a lot of research into all of the design and innovation and creativity frameworks that we could find. And we keep adding more in. We've got well over 80, maybe over 100 by now. And we go in and code them for what are the things that they are doing, what are the mindsets that make up that process, that approach, that methodology. And what we've come up with is there are only 6. And so there's really only 6 different mindsets you need to take on. And mindsets are just a way, a perspective of looking at the world. And so all of these methodologies are trying to get at the same thing, which sort of means they're all okay to use. There isn't the one right one. You don't have to pick, find the right one, go to the right place, get the right certificate. It's something that everyone has access to. And so by starting with a really simple way to view things, you can go out and get tools then from any toolkit that's out there. Something from open source, a proprietary thing that you got from over here, and you can blend and use them all if you understand how you're going about doing it. So, if you're new to innovation, this gives you an easy way and helps you get started on the right path by giving you a guide to all the material that's out there. There's so much information. If you've been trying to innovate, but it hasn't gone quite right, I think this book can help to give you an idea of where it has gone off track and how to get back on track. If you're experiencing some imposter syndrome, like I don't have the authorization or who am I to innovate, innovationist reassures people that you are in the right place and that you can do this. It's giving permission. And if you have been successful at doing innovation, innovationists can help you understand better what you're doing and continue to improve. So, from a growth mindset perspective, we all, including myself, are always learning more about how creativity and innovation work and how we can do it in a better way. So, that's part of how we destroy or get rid of, clear away these myths that people hold.
Earlier today, you mentioned that it's important to distinguish creativity and innovation. Can you elaborate on the difference between the two for our listeners?
So, for a long time, I taught a class called Creativity and Innovation because they're very tightly tied. I was teaching at Stanford with Professor Tina Seelig, and uh, she wanted, because we teach creativity and innovation, people would sometimes ask, what is the difference? We'd get this question from students. Students ask the best questions, the ones that you're not prepared for and don't necessarily have a good answer. And so she went out and wrote a whole book on that. And I like the frame that she uses. Imagination is our ability to envision something that doesn't exist. Like you can imagine a plate of cookies in front of you. Now, your cookies might not look like my cookies, but we both can see a plate of cookies. We all have the ability to use our imagination. If you use your imagination to solve a problem, that's the definition she uses for creativity. And if you define it that way, it's a lot more inclusive. A lot of people, when I ask for the hands to go up, they think, can I create a work of art? Can I make a Picasso? That's a form of creativity. But creativity is really solving a problem by using your imagination and imagining new things. Now, in the world of art, that problem you're solving is how do I communicate an esoteric human quality like grief or anguish or love or joy in a way that I can pass that on to others. And that's the problem they're solving by creating a work of art. So that's going to look different. But when you are working on a problem that you want to solve creatively, it's going to look differently if you're not making art. The problem is different. Separate from that, innovation is using creativity to create something that's new to the world. Mixing and matching, blending new things together, or coming up with uh, 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 so many different ideas that one of them is new and we haven't seen before. Doesn't mean it's a good idea, but innovation is coming up with lots of different ideas that are new. And then she goes on to say that entrepreneurship is taking that and making it exist in the world because there is a lot beyond I have a good idea. If if it just took the ideas, then people all across the country would be millionaires because everybody has great ideas on how to solve their problems every day, but then they don't take that step to go and make it and realize it in the world. So that's kind of stratifying from imagination to entrepreneurship. And I think what innovationist really focuses on is how do you identify and frame the problem that you're really looking for and come up with different ways, test it, and then prepare to enact it in the world.
Right. I love that distinction. And, I'm thinking it is obvious that creativity can exist without innovation. And we can see that by talking with people who have flurry of ideas every day but never execute them.
Right.
So while creativity is highly important in business settings, it is such an abstract process that works best in structure. And that's how we got design thinking methods, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, what is the difference between how does innovation niche augment or differs from design thinking method?
Sure. Design thinking and all of its sort of various forms was one of the methodologies that we used in our research and coded. And design thinking is a structure that it started back in the 50s and was popularized really in the late 90s and early thousands by the Hasselplattner Institute of Design at Stanford. It also was the foundation of the design firm IDEO that a lot of people have heard of and has gotten a lot of notoriety. So that methodology encompasses these same set of mindsets that Innovationish does. So it is just one of many different forms, and it is a great toolkit, and there are a lot of really good learning resources. And so I would encourage people to dig into that and then stop short of that is the way or the only way, that there are others and you don't have to be so locked in. A lot of people or a lot of organizations try to create their proprietary method so that they can sort of protect and sell it, but really they are all working in the same way. And design thinking has these core principles of getting out and doing interactions with people, really understanding the world and learning from others. It has ideation and creating lots of different ideas. Many times it is taught in a way that is a sequence, like here are the steps that you take as a process. And even the D school at Stanford has moved away from that to have the design abilities. It's a different way of explaining it than the mindsets, but that's really what it is. It's the abilities you need to be able to do this thing called creativity and innovation. So I think it matches up really well.
I think actually ability sounds like such a non-inclusive word, right? So like I like when you talk about ability, I almost immediately feel that like someone has this ability and someone does not, right? Like a trait or like not a skill, but the ability. So yeah, but we'll get to that later. So earlier you mentioned six mindset crucial for innovation. Can you share what these mindsets are?
Sure. So interactions is the first one. We name them all with I's to try to make them easier to remember, but interactions is the first one. And that is getting out into the world and interacting with people uh, so that you can learn about a problem and learn about the needs of other people. Insights is the process of taking all those conversations and pulling it together so you can understand what's really going on and have an insight into what's the problem you're trying to solve. Ideas mindset is about generating an avalanche of ideas, thousands and thousands of them, so that you can pick through and find the ones that really work. That is the iterations mindset, going out and testing ideas. Being the idea person is not all that valuable if all you can do is come up with ideas. You have to get it out and test it and see, and you have to be able to hold those ideas loosely. Um, a lot of people come up with an idea, it's their idea, they take ownership, they protect it. It turns it into something else. If you hold them really loosely, like here's one, I could come up with a bunch more, let's see if it works, you can get better feedback and you can let go of those ideas that really aren't going to work. They're a great idea, they just don't work. Inspiration is about enacting storytelling and narrative. To get an idea and develop it, you have to enroll others. You have to enroll clients or customers, partners, people to join the team and be on the project, potentially investors or funders. You need to be able to articulate it in a way that makes sense. And inspiration helps to inspire others to understand what your idea you're going for and what problem you're solving. And then implications is a really important one. There are a lot of very good ideas, but when you actually take that idea and put it out into the world, it can have unintended consequences. Now, hopefully, if you designed well, you have all the intended consequences that you want, but then there are unintended consequences. For instance, I won't pinpoint any particular one, but if you look at social media has algorithms that had things like a like button. And if they had been thinking ahead about what are the implications of that, a like button means that you change the algorithm and tune to get the things that you like, which means you start to eliminate other ideas, and soon you've created an echo chamber. And that echo chamber leads to no new ideas and polarization, which is now really uh, pervasive in our society. We like you see it every day. You could think ahead and realize that allowing an algorithm to do that would look ahead. And I like to think that they didn't do that exercise. I like to think that it was an unintended consequence of them doing things the way they are, because I believe in the goodness of people. But I'm not convinced that it wasn't a profit driven motive. So those are the implications. That's the implications mindset, is looking at, if we do this, how will we do it and what will happen after that?
Richard, how do you suggest cultivate these mindsets and behaviors for leaders and their teams?
We're really, in writing this book, we're talking to three main groups. One is business leaders. How do you foster grassroots innovation in every division and department, and adopt an innovation mindset and culture? We're also talking to the employees of those leaders that are in businesses and nonprofits and governments and schools, all the frontline people, to how do you get past that imposter syndrome, the who am I to be an innovator, to be able to do what the leaders are now asking? And we're also speaking to businesses and schools and graduates who are getting people ready to go into that workforce. So all three of those, I think, work in concert. Understanding that and where people are is a key thing for business leaders. How you reward, uh, give incentives to, and act and operate around creativity and innovation might look different than it did in more traditional styles of management and leadership. And there's quite a change that's happened in leadership in the last 20 years with how people operate, and it still can go more to encourage this. So, one is getting really comfortable with ambiguity, and not comfortable so we can sort of like grip really tightly and make our way through the ambiguity until we're back to the nice, comfortable clarity, but to embrace and sit in ambiguity and not knowing, in being curious and exploring and being uncertain. And in business, with reports and metrics and deadlines and everything, ambiguity can be challenging. But as a leader, it's critical that you embrace the benefit of people sitting and not knowing in ambiguity. Another piece is you have to get comfortable with your relationship to failure. What kinds of failure there are, because there is failure that is stretching beyond, trying to innovate, come up with something new. No one has done it. You should not expect that you can do it right the first time if you are trying to stretch and really innovate. And so you have to get comfortable with the first few tries are not going to work, and maybe the first 100 tries are not going to work. There's the iconic story of the invention of the light bulb and finding 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. That's what we're talking about. But let's not get confused by failure is a good thing. Nobody is trying to fail when they're innovating. They are trying hard to succeed, but fall short a few times as they go through and learn. And in science, if you think about running experiments, the most interesting things that happen is when something unexpected happens, when it doesn't go the way you thought it would. And in there is the discovery and the learning and the understanding. So, thinking about failure as a process of learning and continuing to go to achieve the goal. There is a bad kind of failure. So I don't want to come across as there's no failure and I think the whole world is fantastic. There's some bad failure. And I do it sometimes. I miss an appointment. I just mess up with my calendar. It's failures of just executing on day-to-day routine things. I'm not trying to innovate. I don't celebrate and be like, "Oh, what a great failure. I just missed a meeting." That's not a good and happy innovation failure. So that's what I mean about your relationship to it. I try to succeed at everything. I just give some space for a learning process and not getting it right the first time. And that is those two ideas, ambiguity and learning to change the relationship that you have as a leader when failure happens with your people. If somebody consistently is doing those execution failures, they need some feedback. It might need some other actions that go on. But if you're asking them to stretch, when they come to you and say it didn't work, engaging with what did you learn? Where do we go from here? What is the right next step? So you demystify that. Nobody wants to present the failure to the boss, but if you can encourage them to make those stretches, then they're going to discover incredible things, and you're going to end up with people who have much more agency. They feel more permission. They're going to stretch farther, and they will start to amaze you with the things they go off and do. In fact, I've got a great story. We worked with the CEO of a prestige luxury brand. They make facial products. They explicitly, for years, did not enter the market with any kind of tools, mechanics, machines, or equipment. It was kind of part of the fabric of the company and the CEO's really core that we should not do that. But after we worked with them, we taught them these tools. The CEO started espousing it. He's an amazing guy. The whole company was really doing great things with innovation, but a group on the side went off and did an experiment and said, if we bring this tool in when we do our sales go up on the things that aren't the tool by having it. And they brought the data back to him and said, this is what you told us to do. And this is what it says. And it actually changed that CEO. He was comfortable enough to trust the people, the process that they had done, and that the data showed it was the right thing to do. And so a little bit they entered into that market. So that's a great leadership and innovation story, is he teaches it within the company, not just to his direct team, but to everyone. He'll take somebody in and help them get on board with this and then really live it. And so the whole company is comfortable and will produce that. And it turned out to really be a bottom line benefit to the company.
Yeah, thank you for that example. And it felt like that group really needed lots of agency to be able to venture and start something that was not considered the general direction for the company.
Yeah,
So, one thing I wanted to focus again on your book, and one of the sections that we luckily were able to check out focuses on myths about innovation. Right? Can you
sure.
discuss a few and how they can be barriers to innovate?
Yeah. There are a lot of myths, and I think the media uh, helps to encourage a lot of those myths because they make for really good stories. Like there are a lot of movies out there about Silicon Valley. There are TV shows about Silicon Valley that there's this overnight billionaire, the kid in their dorm room that goes out and they all of a sudden turn into the next unicorn company.
And you can only be innovative in Silicon Valley.
Of course, it's the only place that it ever happens. And the problem with all of those media articles and sources is that they're very loosely based on the truth. They're just not full of truth. It's a great story and it plays well, but uh, they miss the years and years of failure and trial and uh, the iterations that happen before that overnight epiphany. And it does happen fast. Don't get me wrong. After a lot of work getting there, once it takes hold and they really have understood the need, nailed the problem, got a solution that is widespread, it can spread incredibly quickly. I mean, take a look at it was a little over 18 months that ChatGPT launched into the world. The penetration of generative chat has been incredible and it keeps moving at a faster pace. 35 years ago, in school, I was working on AI. It was the same kind of things. It has taken a long time. None of this is really new, but all the pieces have come together to have it come into the world in this new way. And so it is that traditional hockey stick that you see. But all those hockey sticks that you see, if you keep going back to the left, you'll see the very long, close to zero line on it. So those are the kind of myths that are propagated. And one of them, that overnight epiphany, is that innovation is not hard work, or not. Innovation is hard. It is not hard. It is hard work. The individual tools and things that you need to do don't take special degrees and special training. I mean, you can get special training in some of those areas, but if you do it with diligence repeatedly over and over, you can get there. So, um, conversely, there is no such thing as that big eureka moment where someone has the bright idea, right? It's innovation takes continuous incremental iteration, trial, error, going out and interacting with people, trying something, putting it in front of more people. It just takes a lot of work. So there is not just overnight, I thought of the idea. That really just doesn't happen. So that's a couple of the myths that we are trying to get away from and give people permission. In the classes that I teach, especially toward the end of the year, for anybody that's graduating or going out into the workforce, we get a lot of students that come up and want to talk to us about, like, what should I be doing, and how do I go get a job, and how do I take this with me if the company doesn't want to do it. And I think the main thing that I start repeating as we get toward the end of the semester is you have to give yourself permission to go and do this. Most of the time, you're not going to have someone come up and say, could you please start this new process, and here's your permission to go and run with it. That's a message for leaders, is if you can do that and encourage people and set that culture, you're going to get more out of them. But there's a certain amount of, you don't have to say what you're doing. You don't have to go off and start your big new project. You can just incorporate a little bit of innovation into whatever you're doing. Pick a tool or two that might help you move things forward in the work you're already doing. And that is a great thing to do, but you have to give yourself permission. Another one is, although it's easier now, is to get out of the office, get out of your office, your home office, and interact with other people. We so often think I have to sit in my conference room, in my home studio on Zoom, uh, or whatever video conferencing, and I have to come up with the idea. And if you engage other people, you give yourself permission to do things that aren't the way that everybody else is doing them, then you start to achieve those differences. You have a lot more when you go out and talk to someone, come back and say, what I've heard from this group of 10 users is, now that has a lot more weight than just you and your opinion.
It's really seductive, this idea, the idea that you can get all the success that you dreamed about uh, one night, but it can or usually lead to unrealistic expectations. And we recently, Juliana and I, read the HBR article about how this Uber moments, or Eureka
Mm-hmm.
moments, how they overshadow the more important matter of how an invention reaches the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And they provide the example of Thomas Edison, and how he often emphasized the importance of persistence over, random inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And this famous quote that we left, that 1% is inspiration and 99% of perspiration.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how he highlighted this.
Similarly, Thomas Watson Jr. of IBM struggled for years to transition from punch cards to computers, right? same article, yeah, because Jan and I read them as we are getting ready for discussions like this. And he drew inspiration from the Wright brothers, right, who took years of painstaking effort after their initial flight to prove sustained flight to the world.
Yeah. I love all of those stories. And I think is that's what should be taught in all entrepreneurship stories. I think if you interview most entrepreneurs a few years in, they largely will say, if I knew what it would take to get here, I would have never started this. So there's a little bit of this optimism that I think you need to go off and tread a new path. But I think the reality is they would have, because they did choose that path and they kept going. And it is that persistence. I mean, for us, we say it's not hard, it's hard work. It's the same thing. It takes dedication and persistence to move forward, to come up with something that's really new. It's easy to come up with something that is fast, is easy to do, but it may not be the best thing. And the the ideas, the products where you instantly recognize and say, "Oh, I need to get one of those." Those are the ones that have done all of the hard work to really understand the need and what's really going on. And you don't have to be the first one. That's another myth, is that first mover advantage and you have to be the first to the market. Apple is famous for being almost last to the market and their first products not being their best products. They have a design ethic inside that really, they keep iterating and refining and making it better and better. And I think you can't really question the success of their model.
So, how do you suggest to shift from waiting for that Uber moment to embracing an incremental process?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's intoxicating, I think you said intoxicating, about those overnight epiphanies is it means, boy, are you super smart. And I think you have to let go of that and have humility. I think design requires humility. You have to realize that you are not that important, that the other people around you and in front of you that you're designing for and with are the important people. And that's a lesson I actually learned from my side career of performing improv. When you're on stage with somebody, the most important person is the person opposite you. How do you make them look good and serve them? And that same thing is true in design. How do you design for these other people, understand their needs, forget about what you know, take a beginner's mindset and get curious and learn and understand? That is a critical piece for going about. You can design for yourself, and if that's all you want to do, you can call that innovation as well. But I think if you want to design for other people, first you have to take a step of humility. And the other thing is, I think you need to set the bar lower to start. Don't shoot for a moonshot on everything you do. And that's the only thing. And you have to get there in this one giant leap.
That's the hardest part, to be able to move step by step, not seeing and not, seeking for for seeing the whole picture.
Absolutely. Well, and that is navigating this huge sea of ambiguity, because you don't know if you can get there. You don't even know exactly where you're headed, and you still have to keep moving forward. So there's a lot of grit that it takes to move forward to that, and persistence. And then I think you have to, like we were saying about the moonshot, to get to the moon took decades of small steps to get there. And we don't need a moonshot for everything. Like a lot of things, a roof shot is great and can make a big difference within a company. If everybody in the company had one roof shot per year, it would transform every company that adopted that. It can be really powerful. And so a lot of what holds people back, you mentioned design thinking. There are a lot of people that go to take and learn design thinking in courses and boot camps and things like that. And there's this moment of disillusionment that happens because you nobody has the brand new project that you can start from scratch and build a team. I mean, a few people do, lucky few people, but most of them don't. And then if you can't go and do all those things that you were told, then you're kind of stuck and you can't do it. What we're saying with innovation is you can do a little, and doing a little is better, and you move things forward a little bit more, and then you can add some more in. And if you really need a moonshot or something that's really good, you do what those elite design firms are doing, and they are diligently doing these every day, all day, and putting in all the work that's needed to get there. But if you want to just improve your process, your product, your problem that you're solving a little bit, you can just do a little bit and see how it goes. And that's that, give yourself permission to try it. And it can be, for some people, really addicting, where you, I mean that in a very loose sense of like, it's engaging, it's interesting. You get something really good after a lot of hard work, and you're like, that was great. Let me do a little more. And so you can ease into this process. It's not an all or nothing. There isn't a set of steps and you have to do them all. You're partway through a project, jump into some iterations and do a couple of tests. If that's all you do, we're still happy and you're still innovationish as far as we're concerned. You might not be an innovator. You might not be honoring your design thinking certificate, but you are being innovation-ish. And that's why the ish is on there, is it's a little bit softer, gentler entry in to have more of it in the world, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Richard, I'm also curious, what is the role of speed in innovation process in your thinking? Because we recently had this conversation with Hagi Rao. We've discussed with Hagi, who is, who wrote the book about operational excellence and how to scale excellence and how to avoid friction and how friction can be good and bad. And we got this insight from conversation with him that even startups or whatever innovation you create, it's not necessarily you have to, double down on a speed, because sometimes startups and innovation needs to be slowed down by friction, and by that it can save the company from, lawsuits or any other problems that speed
Sure.
usually creates.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, I like the idea of, for me, slowing down, I think equates to stopping to be intentional and thoughtful about not what you do next.
Right.
Not just go fast, break things, just do stuff.
Mhm.
Nothing about what innovation is about just doing more. It's about being really careful and thoughtful about what's the question I need to ask next? How can I find that answer out? Where have I seen something like this before that I can draw on to move it forward? And so it doesn't mean you can't move fast or get a lot of things done. It is hard work, and you can do it in a series of rapid sprints to get there. But I think it's not speed above in intention and thoughtfulness. So the other thing I think is, we all have the real world around us, with deadlines, with clients and deadlines, with funders and deadlines. You have to be able to move progress. And so for me, speed also speaks to the scale or scope. So you can go faster to a smaller piece and then do a series of pieces. And that's a little bit more iterative model. So I think you can move fast. I think you do need to break things. I just think you need more than that. And you need to be careful and thoughtful about how you're getting there. And then give yourself enough structure that you can move and keep pace and keep that persistence going. No structure is actually, it makes it harder. You can swim and wallow in ambiguity. You can do fun, interesting things for a long time in the name of creativity. but I think it's not doing innovation at that point. It's enjoyable, but I think you need to also keep things moving forward with that intention so you have a through line. And for me, the analogy that I like, being a musician, I've played classical and I have played jazz.
We
And
didn't know that.
yeah.
How come we didn't know that yet?
Well, I don't know. Um, with classical music, every note is written. The entire symphony plays together with precision. It is beautiful, but the creativity happens by the composer in orchestrating that. There is creativity in the musicians, but everything is prescribed and there is structure. And for me, that aligns with a more traditional world and a more traditional way that companies went about problem solving, even back to the early days of developing software with what they called the waterfall model. You get requirements, then you develop a version. It's all very sequenced. Jazz, on the other hand, everyone still stays together, but it's very loose. You have the chord structure, and that's all. The notes are not prescribed in most cases. And so if everybody follows the guide and stays in their lane, everything they play will blend together, but it's new, it's different, it's interesting every time, and there's a lot of creative freedom that isn't afforded. I don't want to denigrate. I loved classical music and I loved playing it. It's an act of precision and execution, and jazz is a different form of it. But for me, that's the creativity that happens in innovation and design. Is you have a whole team with a rough set of sprints and objectives, and everybody is working together to come up with something that's magical. And that's where I think innovation can happen.
I really love that analogy, and I love that. I feel like it's such a great metaphor for creativity, music. It's perfect. So let's dive into creative leadership. What does it mean to be a creative leader? Can you share an example of a leader who exemplifies creative leadership?
And I think the example that we talked about of the luxury brand is a really good one of empowering and educating your people, of creating the conditions where the principles, the mindsets that we're talking about in innovation are rewarded. I have heard of, we've had clients that they will have award ceremonies and they will reward failure. You could have failure awards. Everybody has rewards for successes, but that just means the bar keeps getting higher. You have to do it right. But people that have had lots of iterations and lots of failures can be rewarded as well, as long as that is on the way to, and there is a success in there as well. So I think stretches and experiments being rewarded and incentives for that can be really helpful also. Um, I think you have to let go of control. That humility that I talked about, I think has to start with leadership also. Command and control. I am the expert. I know more. I have been there. I have done that. I will distribute the assignments to you to go and do, I think is not the way of innovation. It's not the way of a lot of places. Even the military has gotten away from that command and control. You still respect the hierarchy and the authority there, but things like the commander's intent, where here's the goal that we're going to set. But on the ground, when you are there and doing your job, you might have to modify the plan to achieve the same goal. And I think that is the style that you really want to do. You want to set out strong goals, encourage and nurture people, move things out of their way, help them to try to reflect on what they're doing, to understand where they could go another way, jump in and roll up your sleeves to help them achieve what they're trying to do, is more the style of leadership that is going to foster innovation, really creating that as a culture.
Yeah, as you put it, be right, be brief, be gone doesn't work in leadership anymore.
It doesn't. Not if you want an innovation culture. There are companies, organizations company cultures, that might be the perfect thing, but that is not going to foster innovation and creativity.
Richard, can you share some practical steps that leaders can take to enhance creativity in problem solving?
I think one practical thing that leaders can do to help foster some creativity and some innovation is to ask really good questions. Go to your team, the team lead, to your people, and ask them, how can you better understand what you're working on? Or who else might you need to include to help bring in a different perspective to the project? Um, how could you try how could you experiment to try out the idea you're thinking of to see if it's going to work in the world? Those kind of questions that make people really start to think, take that intentional step. What's the core thing that you need to solve next in your project? So I think being inquisitive, you're going to help people get into thinking about how they're thinking. Metacognitive reflection is what we would call that. How do you help them to start to think through what they're doing more deeply so that they can come up with the solutions on their own? I think that is one very easy, practical thing that leaders can do.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. And as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about creative leadership and innovation and about your work?
I think innovation is for everyone. Anyone can do it. You just have to start with something. Think about what you could do, try something, see how it works, and then learn from that. And don't put the pressure on yourself that you have to do it all or be the smart one. You just have to keep moving forward, intentionally chipping away at that problem. That's where it really happens, is by consistently, intentionally moving forward with what you do next.
Thank you so much, Richard. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and we can't wait to see your book in a bookstore
Thanks. Yeah, me too.
or in
Me
my
too.
mailbox.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Signed book in my mailbox. That's what I
I,
wrote.
I can't wait to see it in a Google Doc. Then we'll get it out to everybody. So,
Step by step,
yeah, step by
incremental
step.
changes.
That is right. That is right. Thank you both so much. I so enjoy interacting with you, and both the last one and this one, and I'm looking forward to the me to
To
we.
the next one. That wraps up our conversation with Richard Braden. Today we explored the essence of creativity and innovation, debunked common myths, and discussed how to cultivate an innovative mindset.
One key takeaway is that innovation is for everyone, and it's about consistently and intentionally moving towards problem solving. If you want to support Mastery Talks, head over to Patreon to patreon.com/masterytalks and join our community to get an access to exclusive giveaway and some extra perks.
Subscribe to Mastery Talks on your favorite podcast app to stay up to date.
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your questions in comments or just write us an email at team@masterytalks.com. We'd love to know how this episode affected you.
Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep innovating and creating.